Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're here with us to stay curious with Mr. Hugh Harris. Hello, Hugh.
Good to see you.
Always great to see you. Hugh Harris, for 35 years, the voice of NASA, once a month, and sometimes more often, maybe down the road, gives us a little review of the shuttles of the month that he was involved in and any other human space flights. Hugh, you doing okay?
Oh, I'm doing fine.
We're having still hot weather here in Florida.
Well, and it looked like it was going to pour when I came in.
Oh, did it? Yeah, yeah. I've been on vacation, and Marty Winkle, my co-producer, has taken over. We had filled a week last week with a couple guests, Nick Thomas, and out there at Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah, Nick's a great guy.
We saw him today and saw astronaut John Harrington, and we're going to record a Stay Curious with astronaut John Harrington that you'll see on a future Stay Curious. So, of course, Nick devoted 35 years to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, telling the story of the American space program, and well known as the voice of NASA through what I call our brave new era of the shuttle program. You would hear your voice confirming the liftoff and the victorious debut of all the orbiters like Columbia, and we're going to talk about, I think, Atlantis' maiden voyage today. And, of course, part of it was the tragic loss of Challenger and the important return to flight of Discovery 2 years later. So you look back, and we were talking earlier today, show you a couple pictures there. Wanted to, there's a nice picture of you about retirement age. Back
that was
there.
a long time ago.
Yeah, well, you look great there. And you know what I love is that you live on the Space Coast, and there's a lot of space workers and say VIPs of the NASA program, and you get together once a month for lunch, don't you, Hugh?
Well, I'm very fortunate in that a number of people, like Jay Honeycutt, for instance, former center director, who I always said was the most surprising of the center directors, because he had all sorts of ideas about what we should be doing from a public affairs standpoint, and felt strongly about making sure that what we were doing had relevance in the rest of the outside world. But Lee Solid, who I think is probably the foremost expert on the F1 engines that were used on the shuttle. John Tribe, who you know very well, and I'm sure he's probably been on the show.
Oh, yes. Hi, John and Melinda. They may be watching, and you never know if Lee Solid's watching. And, of course, Jay and Peggy Honeycutt are Stay Curious watchers, so we say hi all to them.
And but we have people, photographers. It actually was an outgrowth of the Canaveral Press Club, which actually went out of business many, many years ago, unfortunately.
Well, I think it's neat that y'all get together and you don't talk sports, do you?
No, and it's both men and women who are space people. Carol Cavanaugh, who calls in periodically on this, comes on occasion.
Yes, hi, Carol.
And but many others, and but in any case, you want to get to the launches that we had during this month.
Yeah, well, we love talking about everything. You know, I love talking about you old timers, and they support our museum. This is so beautiful to be involved with you all, and also helps you recapture the past and have look forward to something to do once a month, huh?
Well, I stay pretty busy still.
Well, you do, and you're approaching age 90. He's proud to say out there, and you've got a book out there that people can buy on Amazon Smile. Okay, if you want to get it on Amazon, do the SMILE program, and we're your favorite nonprofit, where you did a story on the Challenger, the inside story from the launch control. And it's a very, very, very brief look at the whole thing there. And
Well, it's a short book, but the reason I did it, and there have been many books that have been written about Challenger and about the nuts and bolts about what happened or should have happened. But I really wanted to point up the people who were involved and how they were affected by the accident, and also some of the things that they did in the recovery. And so people are the most important reason we do anything in this world. So I think it's good to mention as many as we can of them.
absolutely, and you do. It's like you said, it's a brief little booklet, but very concise and from the heart. And you need to buy that on Amazon Smile. We're trying to get a big supply of them in here so we can promote them and have you autograph them there, Hugh. But yeah, a little space history before we get into our shuttles of the month. On this date in 1963, Russia launched, actually 64, the Soviet Space Spectacular, the first three-person space flight. And you and I grew up, in the 60s. I grew up in the 60s, but you're a little bit earlier than me. But the Soviet Union premier, Nikita Khrushchev, was quite a character and quite an iron fist type of ruler. And he used the Russian space program like his pawns to promote the communism was the best and so forth. And he demanded a three-man spaceship, and they put the one-person Vostok and took some controls out and put three guys in there in this risky space flight without spacesuits. These three guys went up in compromised conditions, and while they were orbiting, Hugh, Khrushchev was ousted from power by Brezhnev's people, and when they landed, they actually brought him down early because they were so afraid they were going to die. They orbited 6 times. It luckily worked, and the free world didn't know that Voskhod 1 only had one true cosmonaut, Korolev, above my head there. The other two guys was a physician and the designer of the spacecraft. They said, you designed it, you get in it and see if it works.
I think that's certainly an incentive. And of course, one of the real problems the Russians had, which was tragic, because the Russians were really doing very good technical work and advancing the art of flying in space. But almost all of their major designers were killed in the explosion of their large rocket on the pad, and I forget which year it was. But
the N1 rocket, 1967, yes, or earlier, maybe 66, blew up on the pad and did kill over 200. Nedlin was a guy that was a big name and so forth. This is the concept of that spacecraft orbiting Earth, and a look inside just how cramped that is in there. That literally one of the two cosmonauts were sitting in made-up seats, and the third one was laying across their legs to get them in there. It was insane, but they did it for the motherland, I guess, over there. So, but that is a date in space history in 1964 that we lived it. It was a heated moon race at the time, and the propaganda of this led to believe that Russia was leading at the time. That's why Khrushchev did it there. But yes, we're here to talk about the wonderful shuttles of October. There's 12 shuttles in October. And like I said, I've been on vacation, so I don't have my data all in front of me. I actually left some of that at home unpacking. But what are we looking at, Hugh, here? Here's the 1984 launch of 51J, 1985, actually.
And that was the very first launch of the Atlantis spacecraft. And that was pretty interesting from the standpoint that no one was supposed to know what was being done with it.
It was DOD mission.
DOD mission, and it gave a real challenge to the whoever was doing the commentary, and because you weren't allowed to say what was happening, that would give a clue to anybody who was interested outside of the control room as to where they were in the count, where they were going in space, and what it actually was. So on all of the DOD missions, the commentator, and by the way, I wasn't the commentator for the vast majority of shuttle launches, most of the early ones, but I think that it's important to involve multiple people, and certainly that's the only way to have a backup. But in this, Bo Bobko, by the way, was the commander of that flight, and he was the first astronaut to fly on 3 missions, and 2 of them were the maiden flights of the orbiter that he was on. And Atlantis, of course, was a maiden flight.
Didn't know that. Bob Coe on the maiden flight of... so he was the commander of this one, Discovery's first launch.
Atlantis.
Atlantis there. And where am I looking at there? Yes. That was his 3rd flight.
Right.
All right. And then he was on 49, Endeavor. What was his other one, I wonder? I'm looking at my scroll here, Hugh.
It's a good thing you have that.
No, Brandon Steen was on 49. Yeah, we'll get to that later, but that's an interesting fact.
But one of the other thing was in many cases, we were told, and I never saw them myself, that Russian trawlers were off the coast of Cape Canaveral, with outside of the zone of exclusion, and that was to track what was going on. And it was later reported, and I forgot where it was reported, that particular flight carried 2 DOD satellites for communication, and those satellites were reported to have a 10-year life expectancy, but many of that particular variety of communication satellite, which was put into geosynchronous orbit, lasted much longer than 10 years.
What are we looking at here, Hugh, when we see this picture? Let me back up this picture here. The shuttle in the foreground and the Saturn V rocket, what's that all about in our green screen here that I'm showing a smaller version there?
Well, you're looking from back near the vehicle assembly building, I believe, and the shuttle that was there is the one that was refurbished and put into the exhibit out at the Saturn V Center out at the Space Center.
The rocket, yes. The shuttle's in Enterprise, isn't it?
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
The Saturn V, is the Saturn V.
Yes.
It was outside for a long time, and now it is in the under the big Saturn V Center. That's it there. So that was interesting to have that out there, I'm sure, for a while. This is 1985.
Well, it was pretty hard on it, and it became badly corroded, and it was after the bicentennial celebration that it was refurbished. And I mentioned before Carol Cavanaugh, she oversaw the contract that refurbished that and made it a major exhibit out at the center.
Okay, yes, and yeah, we've seen her name pop up. Uh, we have. Oh, okay. I've got. When you're ready, we have an Artemis question from Mark Usiak in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I was talking to Carlton Bailey today, our friend Mark. So, what's Mark's question there, Marty?
It's a long one. I have a question for you. What is the logic behind launching the inaugural flight of the new SLS rocket in darkness for the first time? Doesn't make sense to me with all the tracking markers painted all over it. How they expect to get good tracking photos of it in the dark? Your thoughts, Hugh. And by the way, it's now scheduled for November 14th, 12:04 a.m.
Well, the time of day or night, as the case may be, is usually not related to the the taking pictures and that sort of thing. I mean, we're going to get pictures of it lifting off. It's really what is the orbit that you want to put it in, or the trajectory, and also what do you want to do while it's in space. So I hate to say I have no idea about that because I haven't been involved with Artemis, but I don't think it was primarily because of the photography, and of course the Usiak brothers are great photographers.
Yeah. Well, there's a grumbling from a photographer there because and NASA actually said they wanted to launch it during the day and land it during the day, and at night compromises again maybe some of the views that they could get, but they got cameras everywhere to see everything. But yeah, Marty's right. They're targeting Monday, November 14th. Actually, that's Sunday night. Monday morning at 12:04, so it'd be midnight Sunday to Monday, and then there's a Wednesday date and a Saturday date that they're looking at, and that comes from our good friend Carlton Bailey. Yeah, Marty.
Keith Soul commented. He said it's at 12:07 a.m.
Okay, thank you, Keith. 12:04, 12:07. It's right after midnight Sunday night, Monday morning. So that'll bring a good circus to town, don't you think?
Well, it depends. There certainly was a good circus here the first time it was supposed to go.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun too. We had German TV here. Marty was featured with them, and a lot of good fun energy that night, despite the scrub, right, Marty?
But I suspect that the number of visitors will go down somewhat. Because of the uncertainty.
Yes, right. They're actually sending out, Carlton said, the NASA PR people, are you going to come or not? Because if you're not going to come, then we want to get our waiting list people in there. And you're familiar with that situation.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, I was involved with that, of course, all through my career. But we allowed more than 80,000 people to view launches on the center at one
80,000.
And you could imagine the traffic jams that occurred from that. And also some, interesting people trying to get around those traffic jams, like and I've forgotten the name of it's a famous reporter who took to the center strip and bypassed a lot of cars because he had to get back to the press site.
Oh, really? I hadn't heard that story. That'll pop into your mind, though, I'm sure.
Right.
Well, I've been to a lot of 80,000 stadiums out there in NASCAR and football and baseball, but they're set up for the roads. Here we're not. There's only like 3 roads that go north and south in our county,
right?
and the rest of them go east and west. So, well, we're enjoying a great conversation as usual with Mr. Hugh Harris here. We're going to jump into the shuttles of the month. I didn't get all my graphics together. I apologize for that. but we're going to kick it off with the STS-41G, and in 1984, the launch of Challenger with this crew. Tell us about this famous mission, Mr. Hugh Harris.
Well, this had 7 crew members, and that was the most number of people that we had on a shuttle up to that time. Bob Crippen was the commander. It was his 4th flight, and what they deployed was the first of 3 Earth radiation budget satellites, which measured the amount of energy that the Earth receives from the sun and reflects back into space. And that had a number of firsts. For instance, Sally Ride and Kathy Sullivan, it was the first time that 2 women had flown together. And Kathy became the first American woman to walk in space. And working with David Leesma, who also was on that particular spacewalk, demonstrated the ability to refuel satellites that were in orbit, capture them, refuel them, and put them back in orbit. And a book came out of that. Paul Scully Powers, who was the first Australian astronaut, was on that flight. And a book called Oceans to Orbit, Australia's first man in space, was published about him. At the time, Paul actually was working for the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory. There was also a rumor that involved that particular launch, and that was that the Russians had targeted it with low-power laser that caused the temporary blinding of the crew and malfunctions. This was denied by all of the crew members, and but it was one of those rumors that pops up from time to time.
Did you field that question at a press conference?
No,
that?
I didn't personally have to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but that was in 1984, and it was a very interesting time when we really had the space race going on.
Absolutely. Here is the crew. Leesma there is to the right. The 2 ladies there, of course, Sally Ride and Kathy Sullivan. Sally Ride, very petite lady. Kathy, not so petite. And they're sitting beside each other. You can see the comparison. That's John Mcbride there on the far left. John was the pilot. You know John quite well.
Oh, yes. And he, of course, was very instrumental in getting the shuttle, one of the used shuttles for display at the KSC Visitor Center.
He was going to be a commander, and the Challenger accident happened, and he was going to wait a long time to fly, and he became the lead astronaut out at Kennedy Visitors Complex, corralling all the astronauts in there with Nick Thomas for the great talks that they do out there. In the back row, there's Scully Powers on the left, and of course Bob Crippen there in the middle. Bob always had a nice tan, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
He liked fishing or being outdoors, I guess. And the Canadian there's Mark Garneau, and Leesma there's beside Kathy Sullivan. I did want to note here on my scroll that Cripp flew twice in 1984. This mission was launched October 5th, and he was in space in April 6th, 84. Pretty quick turnaround there. April, May, June, July, August, September, 6 months, yeah.
Well, he had some experience.
Yeah, he did.
So he didn't need... also, I didn't mention, but Mark Garneau was the very first Canadian to fly in space, and he was on that mission.
Just to remind people, Hugh, that there's a lot of science, and particularly this early first of 25 flights of the shuttle, a lot of demonstrations of what we can do. You just mentioned the fueling of a satellite, very important to figure out how to do that in space. And then here is the spacewalk. Kathy Sullivan is in the upper right. Dave Leeson is in the bottom. Marty, I brought in Kathy Sullivan's handprints here. If you mind zooming in on them, I'm going to do this and so everyone can see what we're all about here at the Space Museum. This is how we were founded. Oh, you're not going to, there, I'll hold it up like that. There's her handprints in our women's gallery. She had 3 space flights. I would love to meet her one day, but we just wanted to show you, this is what we're proud of, is that we're the only place in the world you can put your handprints on Kathy Sullivan's or Sally Ride, or we've got Eileen Collins, and there's Neil and Buzz are here in our museum, and there's 30 astronauts over at Spaceview Park. Right? And you know I'm always championing that, Hugh.
Yes.
That's our Taj Mahal over there at Spaceview Park.
Well, I think it's a great place for people to see, and you not only have things there that are, astronaut related, but also there's a lot of people who worked in the program whose names are on the various monuments.
That's right.
And things.
That was the whole idea, to honor the space worker with their names on plaques. Marty's there in the you're there in the Apollo and the Shuttle gallery, aren't you, Marty, over there? And very unique. I've always said I work for Newsweek, and I wish they would call me up and say, send $100 and we'll put your name on the side of Madison Avenue there. But are you out there? You got to be out there, right?
I'm not sure.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll double check that. Give me $100 and I'll do check. Let me hold a $100 bill and I'll check it for you. And if not, we'll put it up there for you, Hugh. Well, here's a good crew. We're going to go through some of these shuttle flights a little quickly and spend a little time on some of the other ones with Hugh's notes here. But this is 41G was launched on October 5th, 1984, and then STS-41 without the G was launched 6 years later on October 6th. And that G stuff is all about a government accounting office to track the shuttles, and it was very convoluted. 41G, the 1 means launched at Kennedy Space Center. It would have been a 2 if it was going to be launched at Vandenberg, which they never did launch, I think, at Vandenberg. And after STS-25, 51L was the Challenger, the 25th shuttle flight. They went to the numeric logical thing. But I wanted to put this up there because our good friend Bruce Melnick, who's the astronaut in charge out at Kennedy Visitors Complex, he's on the far left there, and he loves this picture. He says this says Top Gun jet jockeys, and he's a Coast Guard aviator and helicopters and stuff.
Well, I always wanted to fly in one of those T-38s, but I never did.
You never did, huh? They never got you in the back seat. Well, what do you know about STS-41 you want to share with us? That was Discovery?
Originally, that was supposed to actually have 2 separate spacecraft on it, but that was combined, and originally there was going to be one from the European Space Agency and one from NASA, and that really goes back in history from the standpoint that originally it was supposed to be called Odysseus, and of course that's where the word Odyssey comes from, because it's about the trip that wandered all over, but it was changed to Ulysses at the request of the European Space Agency in order to honor both the story that was written by Homer about Odysseus and the story about Dante's character in the Inferno. And but that has nothing to do with what it was going to do in space, other than it was going to wander. And it was originally scheduled for May of 1986, but it was delayed by the Challenger accident 4 years. And it's was a spacecraft that was studying the sun, and it also was the first spacecraft to be launched out of the plane of the ecliptic. And the plane of the ecliptic, if we have some children out there that don't know, is all of the planets around the sun are in basically the same plane, and that's called the plane of the ecliptic, which is going around around the sun. But in order to get out of that, you need, because part of the energy that takes spacecraft into orbit comes from the speed with which the sun or the Earth is going around the sun, as well as a little bit the rotation of the Earth. In any case, you can't build a rocket large enough to launch out of the plane of the ecliptic, and so you had to decide, figure out what you could do. And what you can do is that you can make use of the gravity of the largest planet which we have in the solar system, Jupiter, to change the plane that the spacecraft is in. And this creates other problems. One, Jupiter is too far from the sun to make good use of solar cells. So therefore, you have to use nuclear power in the form of what's called RTGs, and which are radioisotope thermal generators. And the heat from the decay of the fuel in that RTG is used to both heat the spacecraft, produce electrical power for it, and also not be affected by being close to the sun and far away from the sun. But it also brings something with it that you don't necessarily want, and those are protesters. And we had, if I recall right, this was not the first launch of RTGs.
We've got another one, STS-34, going to Jupiter. This probe was going to Venus, the Ulysses craft in there. It was the Venus probe.
This was going to Jupiter.
Okay. No, 41 was Ulysses going to, it went to Jupiter to use its gravity assist to go over the poles of Venus. Yes. Yes. Yeah. 34 was that Mike McCulley launched. You got the right notes there, and it did the right thing there.
Well, basically the Ulysses spacecraft, the main part of it was about the same dimensions as your studio here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you have to put on an antenna and a few other pertinences in order to make that work. But, and also you had the RTGs sticking out from that.
Right. Let's look at STS-112, launched on October 7th, and that is right here. The crew of 112 there has Pam Melroy there as a pilot. And let me get my scroll here. Tell us a little quickly about this mission. We got a lot to cover here. We got to get to John Glenn's famous mission here.
Well, this is the only time that I recall that a hurricane threatening Houston caused a launch to slip. And
really?
in this particular time, it slipped for 5 days. I think the hurricane was called Lily, but I'm not completely sure about that. And also, you know that the space program and the space hardware is built with many built back-in modes and things to take over if something else goes wrong. Well, in this particular launch, the explosive charge that separates the bolts that hold the solid rocket boosters to the pad, one of those failed, but there was a backup charge which was automatically triggered, and so it got off. But you can imagine that if all the other bolts have exploded and it's ready to lift off, but one of them's hanging on, that whole thing is just going to either fall over or completely wreck the pad and the spacecraft or the launch vehicle, and that.
So much has to happen, synchronized in the right time. This was Pambo's second flight there as a pilot. She had 3 flights in October. We'll talk about, including the command there.
Now this particular launch carried an interesting tool for the astronauts to use in the assembly of the space station, called the CETA, CETA, for Crew and Equipment Translation Aid. Almost everything that NASA does has a acronym, and they could have named it a little bitty rail car, which would come out Lieberg, but
which you'd understand, because that's what it was a rail car, like
that's right,
a coal car on a short little track that they could slide back
and it was
forth.
using that to move people and supplies up there on the space station.
Sandy Magnus is on this mission. You're looking at 3 veterans and 3 rookies in this picture there. Ashby was the commander, Melroy. Wolf was going up on his, Michael Wolf there, center left of Pam, was going up on his 4th mission. Yeah, his 4th mission there.
And if you doubt the power of women, it was
never do that. You no, I don't doubt the power of women.
Sandra Magnus and Peggy lifted a 14-ton, 45-foot truss out of Atlantis's cargo bay, and with the Canada arm steered it to the station and fastened it with 4 remotely operated bolts.
Wow. That was quite a feat of Herculean strength there in zero-G. Well, there we got an interesting one that you wanted to talk a little bit about. STS-92 was launched on October 11th, 1992, or 2000, year 2000. STS-92 Discovery was the orbiter, OB-103, and Duffy's the commander, and this was Pam Melroy's first trip to flight as a pilot. And tell us a little bit about that and how important this was.
Well, that was a assembly flight for the International Space Station, and those are usually fairly prosaic in that what they're doing is taking up big pieces of hardware, electronics, etc., and then fitting them all together. So it doesn't sound quite as exciting as going to Jupiter and that sort of thing, but it's a tremendous job for the astronauts to work. And I think you have some pictures that shows them working on the.
I do, but we got this gag picture here that the astronauts are known for their gag picture. This one I've never seen. It's in low resolution. This is during the Austin Powers movie craze of Mike Myers there. And Mike Myers is in the picture up in the upper right, and they're all doing the little pinky thing of Mini-Me, who's on the bottom. So I assume that's the real actors. That is Pam on the left. They all wore skull caps and stuff. Love to ask our friend Sharon, who's the suit tech in Houston, about this picture, because I'm sure she was there. But,
Yes.
Sharon McDougal, hi to you. And this was the 100th Space Shuttle mission. As we know, you can never count the numbers. They're all a lot of them are out of sequence because of various payload issues or orbiter issues or whatever. But yes, they were quite mixed up in a tangle of wires and hoses and stuff, weren't they?
And this was the final assembly mission before a permanent crew came to occupy the space station.
In 1990 and 2000, the year 2000, this was the October 11th launch, and in November of 2000, the first crew went up, and that was Bill Shepard and Krikalev, I think, was on that, the Russian. And we have had continuous occupancy for 22 years coming up in
That's
November of human beings orbiting the Earth. So somebody 22 years old, Hugh, has never known that there's not people orbiting Earth.
That's right.
When we waited with trepidation for the next human to go to Earth in the 60s and 70s and so forth. So I think that's quite an accomplishment for humanity, 22 years of living in outer space.
And it's been interesting to live through that particular level, and would love to come back in 100 years and see what has happened since then.
Yeah. So what more about this mission did you have there, Hugh? Here's another picture of one of the spacewalking astronauts. They did 3 spacewalks, a very serious construction mission this was.
Yeah, and there were 2 teams of spacewalkers, William MacArthur and Leroy Chow, and the other one was Jeff Wissoff, whose name I may be mispronouncing, and Michael Lopez Alegria. And so they were out for more than 25 hours altogether, not all at the same time, but 2 at a time. And
7 hours is usually the baseline for a spacewalk.
6 to 7 hours, but 25 hours in doing the final assembly up there. And at the end, it was 2 days of bad weather that prevented them from landing, and they had to stay up an extra 2 days and then landed at Edwards Air Force Base.
Well, then we've got STS-34, which our good friend Mike McCulley was the pilot of. This flight deployed the Galileo telescope here to Jupiter. That was in 1989. All right, STS-34, as I look at my scroll here, 43, we're talking STS-34. which Williams was the commander on that. McCulley, Ellen Baker, Chang Diaz, and Shannon Lucid. So again, 2 women flew. Have to on Atlantis. Looks like October's got a lot of multiple women on the missions there. I'll have to add that up there, which is a good thing.
Well, I think there's been 65 women in space. I think I saw a sign here.
Yes, we got a sign here. It's up to 72 now. It was 69, and 2 women were launched on the Crew Dragon 5. So now we're up to 72, and of the 590 people, I think, have been in orbit of the Earth, we call it, Hugh. Well, here's STS-58, another October flight. 58 has Blaha as the commander on his 4th mission. Searfoss, and we have Rhea Seddon. Again, 2 women on a space flight, Rhea Seddon and Shannon Lucid. Lucid's got 2 flights in October.
But don't forget the 48 rats.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I did forget them.
They were in 24 cages, so there were 2 in each cage.
Really?
But that was there was a series of experiments there, which primarily was looking at the effect of weightlessness and the muscles and the skeletal parts of the body and how that was affected by being in space for a length of time.
Huh, interesting. Marty showed me 589. Actually, we have 2 to add to that. I haven't upgraded the sign. 591 humans have orbited the Earth. There's about 620 people involved when you throw the 7 the suborbital flights of Blue Origin in that, and a couple X-15 flights. Marty, we got any comments from anybody out there? You got to shout out to some of our friends there? Go ahead and you shout out to them there, Marty. Or have Hugh do it, okay?
Well,
yeah, Hugh, who we got watching us today there?
Well, we have, both Mark and Tom Usiak, of course, Regina O'Donnell, Ruth Spooner, Doug Forrest, Carlton Bailey, Keith
Sewell.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
William Whiting, Cynthia Rossi.
Hi, Cynthia.
Lisa Marie, Sharon McDougall.
She is watching. That's the suit tech. I want to know about that Austin Powers setup there, Sharon. I'll have to drop you a line on that.
Well, yes, and don't hide. It's a interesting picture. Later on, we'll talk about some other things that have been on that you may have had a hand in also. There's Dave Stang and Madeline Vanderleen.
Good. Well, thank you all for watching. Stay curious there.
Yes.
All great friends. A couple new names on there.
Glad to have you with us.
That's right. It's important to our outreach of the American Space Museum. We're a proud nonprofit that for 21 years has been celebrating the birth of America's space age right here in what we call its delivery room, Hugh, Brevard County.
Right.
Marty, you got a question?
No, it's a comment. Sorry. Carlton Bailey said he's pretty sure, excuse me, the actors were photoshopped in.
Okay. Yeah.
So
All right.
Karan may not know.
Yeah, in that picture there, the actors probably were photoshopped in. I could tell the Austin Powers guy was photoshopped in, but it looks like Mike Myers may have been there because he's got a skull cap up in the back. But we'll ask Sharon about that and get have a program maybe with her one day on all the comical photographs that the astronauts
Well,
did.
I'm not sure we should be mentioning the Photoshop thing. During the early parts of the space program, there was all sorts of rumors out there that we were photoshopping people walking on the moon and that sort of thing, which actually was happening. But nevertheless, it's a fun thing to do.
Yes, it is.
And we have some great photographers all around us here in Brevard County.
Absolutely, and we hope they get out there with their lenses on Artemis, and certainly are getting our fill of unmanned launches
Yes, certainly
in
are.
there. Marty showed me a picture of the night launch with a twilight launch last week with the full moon rising and the plume coming up. Did you get out and watch that one?
That plume was fantastic because the sun caught it at just the right angle to make it glow in space.
Well, our shuttles of the month. We've got. Let me back up here. We had. Here are our shuttles of 12 shuttles of October. Apologize. Like I said, I've been on vacation, haven't had time to buff everything up the way I wanted to. Taking the first week of this month off, but we've got a couple other missions we want to talk about there. And did you have some notes on 58 or 73 or 52?
Well, I did, but since we're running sort of long here, you might want to jump to
This one,
STS-95.
which is the John Glenn launch with 6 other people. You said this was towards the end of your retirement days. 95 was in
Well, we're
1998.
yeah, I'm still not at the end of my retirement days.
Okay.
It was my working days officially as the director of public affairs.
Okay.
And
So
yeah,
dealing with the great John Young, we've had several people in our program, including White Room lead Travis Thompson, talk about the other 6 astronauts kind of were in the background there because everybody wanted to talk to John Glenn. They even did a mock-up of the Mercury 7 photograph. They lined them up like the Mercury 7 in this picture for a little retro thing. And there they are there. Brown was the commander there. And tell us about it, Hugh.
well, one of the things that need to say right up front is that John Glenn, despite the tremendous fame that he had, and it was one of the most humble people, I think, in the whole astronaut group, and he did not go out of his way to seek being in the limelight, and of course, at his age then, too, he had, been known by millions of people for a very long time, and certainly by reporters. So he was sought out not only for what he did originally in flying in orbit, but as a senator and as other things that he did during his lifetime. But having said that, certainly there was a lot of people wanting to interview him and take pictures, and so it was very hard on the rest of the crew. But I don't think that he ignored the rest of the crew. He knew, very well that it's all of the people as a team that makes our ability to operate in space happen. But he was the oldest person at the time to go into space, and since that time, there have been other people who are older. Wally Funk, for instance, who was one of the original women who was involved in preparations for the Mercury program, flew on a suborbital flight of Blue Origin at the age of 82, and William Shatner at age 90 also broke the thing. However, John Glenn remains the oldest to ever actually orbit in space.
And how old was he, Hugh?
He was, let's see, 82, or wait a minute, I'm sorry. He was 77 when he returned to space. And of course, he's passed away, which is.
He was 40 when he orbited in 1962.
Mm-hmm.
So Marty's got a question there for us, Hugh.
Yeah, Tom Usiak is asking, I was told that STS 95 had more accredited media at the press site than any launch. Does that sound accurate, you?
I don't think so. Unfortunately, I wasn't there.
Oh.
I wanted to be there, but NASA had what are called buyouts, and I had to either accept the buyout, which was sort of a bonus, and retire in May, or forget about it and stay around to, and because of the fact I was already, I think, 66 at the time, I decided, well, I've got to do it sometime. So unfortunately, I missed that mission, and but I did see John Glenn after that. So, and which was always a pleasure to
you got
see
some
those
other notes there to share of
But,
this mission.
Yeah, Bill Clinton, who was president at the time, came to that launch, and I can't remember what the statistics were on the numbers, but I really think we had more people here for much earlier in the program than for the John Glenn mission.
Well, Apollo 11 would be hard to top. Apollo 8 had a bunch.
Yeah.
STS-1, pretty seminal. But it had a lot of people there.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you and I both, I grew up in Ohio. You had your first NASA job in Cleveland at Ohio. John Glenn, I had the privilege to meet many times because I was an Associated Press photographer, putting myself through Ohio State, and went to many of his press conferences. Speak a little bit, Hugh, about what a tremendous human being he was. He really was. He's one of the most, of all the people I've met in my life, I will never, ever forget every moment I was with John Glenn at press conferences.
Well, he was, I think that the other astronaut, the other original astronauts, each one of them was a unique personality, and he was always known as being a Boy Scout, and very, very straightforward, and he was very gracious, and one of the first people to thank workers for what they were doing, and also to attend ceremonies at which other people were being honored. And so it was always a pleasure. He also had a great memory for people, and he always called you by name, something that I can't do, although I do know who you are.
Thank you.
And also Marty. But,
when you're a late octogenarian, we cut you some slack.
Oh,
okay,
good, yes.
Yeah. He commanded the room. He's just an unbelievable nice guy and super intelligent and a Marine. In my opinion, he's the last great American hero. What do you think about that?
Well, I certainly hope not.
You hope not? Well, think back. Who would we call an American hero after John Glenn?
Well, there's many heroes in various
Absolutely
parts of our society, and and I think he'd be the last one to say that he was the quintessential American hero.
Absolutely.
But he certainly was a tremendous gentleman and contributed a lot to the country.
And we're glad that he got that space flight, and it was a life science mission.
Absolutely.
It was not a piece of cake for a 77-year-old. Travis Thompson told us when he came back he was quite sick. They had to wait them all coming out because he was had hydrated too much, I guess.
Mhm.
One of the things for reentry there.
Well,
But,
and he also got stuck with needles and various other tests
absolutely.
forever.
That's why he flew, because he always had his NASA physicals. He had the
Yeah,
database
that's
of
right.
all that, so that they were very comfortable with his health. Marty, you're about that age. I won't reveal exactly, but I would think Marty's fit enough to go to space. Marty, what do you think about that? I would say you could go to
Well,
space.
I'm a year older than he was back then,
Yeah.
but yeah, let's do a GoFundMe.
A GoFundMe for Marty to go into
Hey!
space. Yes, we'll start that. Yes, I know Marty could do it. I couldn't. I have vertigo on there. But Hugh, we spent an hour here with you, and you made a lot of notes. Sorry we didn't get through them all. We start talking about Artemis and the Russian space program, but we're always happy to have you here. We've got one of our other wonderful supporters watching today. Want a little shout out there. Look at this nice piece of artwork here. Hello there, Chris Calley.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, Chris is one of our friends. He's watching today, and for some reason I said I want a little Chris Calley art on today's show there. That's his Earthrise over the moon, a painting with some Photoshop in the background there.
Well,
So thank you, Chris, for supporting our museum. Steve Hammer's also been watching our show today. And,
well, you know, I think that nothing actually becomes real until it's transformed into art, one way or the other. And
interesting observation.
So I applaud Chris and all the other artists who have been involved with the space
And
program.
of course, Chris's father, Paul. Did you ever
Yeah.
meet him? The great sketch artist allowed in the Apollo 11
Yeah.
suit room and other things he's done.
Well, only in passing,
Uh-huh.
so I
Okay.
can't say I know him.
But I didn't know if you ever orchestrated an event with him or anything on there. So, Marty, good job today. We've got Doug Forrest is watching. Yep, another artist. Hugh mentioned Doug there in Los Angeles. And we appreciate everybody following our Stay Curious episodes here as I'm getting back in the groove here of doing something that's unbelievable that I'm doing, like talking to Mr. Hugh Harris here, one of my heroes in the space program. So, Hugh, is there anything you'd like to share today before we say goodbye?
Well, I think everybody should keep looking up and stretching both their imagination and their talents.
Well said. At any age. In fact, I was reading a little Buddhist meditation the other day, and it said our body ages, but our mind doesn't. Our mind always is ready to learn new things at whatever age. And we're glad that you're with us to share the things that you've learned about the space program. It's a real honor. So, great. Fun show. Thank you all for being here today. Mr. Harris will be with us next month for the Shuttles of November, and he and I are going to start working together to put together some programs about the media personalities that you dealt with, from the great Walter Cronkite to the also great, but maybe sort of not so well known Mary Bubb, and so forth. Right?
She was one of the real characters of the early space program, and there's so many though who were reporters and photographers and cinematographers and writers, and it's so important because the space program is more dependent, I think, on the media than any other government program. And it also doesn't spend money on advertising.
Yeah, exactly. So well put. Well, we've enjoyed a great hour with Mr. Hugh Harris here on this episode of Stay Curious. Marty, thank you for a great Streamlabs job today. And Trekkie Techie Jessica was there when we needed to solve a few problems today. Thank you, dear, for supporting us in the background here. And got to give a shout out to Karan Conklin, our executive director. And we've got a lot of energy going here at our Space Museum with our education program led by Darren Roberts. And it's good to see kids in our building and getting some STEAM education and excited about space.
Yep.
That's where it goes. So thanks again for everybody. I'm Mark Marquette, and I can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.